Yeah, so Lazy Warlock is making a face because for reasons. But welcome everybody to Speaker Sunday for Lords of Nysera. It's a TRPG that's going to be coming out into early access for Steam, and it's going to come out in early access February 2025. Is that correct? Yeah. So yeah, and I'm Lillette, and
And I'm Tony. I'm the Lazy Warlock. I'm the lead developer, artist, story writer, and world builder of Lords of Nysera. And we're coming to you for Speaker Sunday once again to talk about what we've been working on, the latest sprint, which has been the past couple weeks, as well as just like the progress of the last chapter that we've been working on and what we're doing next. So that's what we're going to be doing. Those of you who have been tuning in the past couple of days have probably seen what we're working on. It's pretty neat. But today we're going to be going in detail about what it all is, how it works, the goal for them at least to work, and what it brings to the table tactically for the game. So, but before we do that, who are you, Lillette?
so I play a support role in the development of Lords of Nysera. I do the YouTube channel and a little bit of the Discord, except, honestly, I've been super impressed and really happy with just how much you've been interacting on the Discord lately. It's been great. So,
Yeah, I'm usually like a forest goblin just hanging out, making little spears and stuff, making my game, not really talking to people. So I've been trying my best to be out in the world and sharing what's going on. So
yeah, how have you liked it so far? Because I feel like you went from like no social media to now you're on there all the time, and it's been a really cool shift to see you go through that.
it took a kind of a mental change, like in how I approach it and how I feel about it, right? Because for the longest time, I felt like if I didn't have anything worth sharing, then there was no reason to talk about it, right? If it wasn't ready, if it wasn't polished, if it didn't look good, then I shouldn't share it. But after the Kickstarter and talking with people and seeing how they want to give their input and whatnot, I learned that it's okay to share things when they're not like when they're not even like half baked, right? Where they're like you mixed up the batter and you're not even sure if it's going to turn into a cake or not. You just want to like throw out what you like, show people what you're working on, right? Because that alone is exciting, and getting input from it is always useful at every stage of development. So I've very much changed my perspective on how often I should share things and being okay with sharing things that aren't just exactly ready yet. So that's kind of why like we're talking about all sorts of things today. So just to get right into it, there's two big things that we've been working on for the past 2 weeks, and it's been pretty much in preparation for chapter 4. Every chapter, up to a certain point, it's always introducing something new to the character. We don't want to throw everything at them at once, especially because they're big chapters, right? I've been recently playing some old school Fire Emblem stuff and realized, boy, these maps are small compared to my game, like teeny teeny. Sometimes like they take up just the screen and that's it, right? They are small maps. And so I'm reminding myself that I have a large scale to these maps and I need to dial it back with all the things that players are getting into. Um, and so chapter 3 was huge. Like it's number 3 is a big number in the world. Number 3 is like a useful number in general. It's where like the game is building up to this war effort sort of thing, right? So it throws a lot at the player. There's so many things going on, so many factions, and I decided after that, instead of trying to like keep that like amped up momentum going forever, it would just feel like a constant adrenaline, like, it'd be too much, right, coding wise, to like try and match that energy of every map. And then it actually is probably good to have like a variety of different maps, right? Some of them there isn't a bunch of different factions and new people you have to meet, right? It's just like that's what chapter 4 is, right? Chapter 4 is more like, okay, you made it past this like threshold of warfare. Now you're doing more or less, tactical battles, and you're learning things that the game has to offer. Like not just the basics, not just spells, but like, oh, by the way, you can use boats, and it shows you how to use boats, and people explain in it like, don't remove us, the wake finders, from your boats, otherwise you'll be dead in the water. And they let you know that, and then you get like move them into them, and then you move the boats around, and there's a few boats to fight, and you drop them off, so on and so forth, right? Because it'll come up later. Like, it won't be the only nautical battle, right? Like, I have I have plans for all sorts of nautical battles that will be involved in the game, especially because like it opens up so many cool pirate opportunities too. I can literally have like pirates that show up on a map now and and get to harass players. So it'll be really cool. Um, you can and so let's like go into details on what exactly. You're on a ship in the map, and maybe the map moves a little bit, like there's someone boarding it and you fight, but everyone complains about those maps being like awful because you're confined to this little space and blah 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 whatever. I always thought they were kind of neat, but I decided that I should actually have ships involved in the game. Kind of akin to in Advanced Wars, how you can load units into ships and whatnot, but taking it a step further. So there are ships throughout the game. You'll eventually be able to purchase them or build them if you like have the means to do so. You can also capture ships. So if you defeat an enemy and you don't just destroy the ship, you can capture the ship and take it for your own. And when battle start, like before battle starts in the preparations, you can load them up with units. So it'll show how many slots on that ship is open. You can just drop units into it. They'll run up to it, go inside of it, and everything. And then once you're ready, you start the battle. Because though the world is has this giant storm spinning around it, there are tides. So there will be indicators in the game showing which direction the tide is moving in. And it's typically east, south, west, north. There won't be like individual tiles you have to take care of. But pretty much it will restrict movement in one direction unless you have a mage who is guiding the ship. All you have to do is have a mage in it who has a special skill called wake finding. It's usually enchanters, so any water mage more or less can do that. And as long as they're on the ship, you can more or less guide it with normal movement as long as it's stocked full of people, because you can't have a ship move without people on it too. They have to be manned. So if you put one guy on your ship and expect him to move the ship by himself, it's going to move one square at a time, more or less. Whereas if you fill it full of units, you get to use the full movement of them, and they can move pretty far because there's very little obstructions in the open water, and so they can just sail, 8 spaces at a time. Now, when you select a ship in the game, so it used to be before, like, you couldn't really do much with ships. There just wasn't any features added into it. They were there, and they could kind of hold units, but I hadn't really sussed out exactly how to do it. But now, when you select that ship, it'll pop up in a menu, and it'll show all the units that are loaded into it. And you can just select any one of those units and take their action from inside the ship. So if you move your ship, which has its own independent action, you move your ship in range of an enemy ship, you can select your units in it and just target that ship. So you can just send a volley of arrows if you just chock that ship full of archers and just lay waste to other enemy ships, which was done. So I had to do a little research, like, do people even shoot arrows at each other on boats? Is it like way too hard when a boat's rocking around to even bother shooting arrows? So I had to look it up, and they did. There's actually some pretty famous situations with boats and arrows and whatnot. I even learned actually that like where the ship anatomy gets some of its naming, the forecastle and aft castle, they literally had little castles they built into them. So they made little wooden castles with like the little crenellation things and everything, and would shoot arrows from them. Super cool. So you're gonna take your actions from the boat. When you get to land, you can dock out of it. So you can just disembark and run around and do your regular thing. And now the enemies can do it too. Before I had to do it through code where it was like scripted, where more or less it would get to a spot and then I would have a script that like, is this boat at the spot it's supposed to be? Okay, now unload everyone at once. It was really clunky. I didn't really like it. And now I have it so that the individual units will know if their boat has made it to where they want to, and then they'll disembark if their AI code, like if their NPC control says you need to like do this, get off the boat, they'll get off. Sometimes they will actually hang out on the boat and use it as a defensive position, but that's not very common. It's mostly just they just unload and go straight into the battle. So The only thing that's missing right now is that when you attack an enemy boat, it doesn't let you select which enemy to attack. So I just gotta add like one more menu in that lets you choose which enemy to attack, and then when you select them, it just goes to the battle. So that's kind of one more thing I need to add in, and then it'll more or less be 100%ish complete. Really happy in general with how it turned out, because it's just going to open up so many cool scenarios, and I just like the idea of players being able to, like, you know, just storm a beach and drop off all your units and then just rampage up a beach and go attack them and blah blah blah, all those things. So I am even considering like finding a way to add, because there's siege engines, right? There's already siege engines in the game. I want to be able to add warships. So because that was something that happened all the time too, was they would put literal catapults on boats. So being able to like move a warship in range of a fort and launch rocks at the the enemy base, stuff like that. So that was the big nautical update, and that was necessary for Chapter 4 because you're literally storming the Sarshan beaches because the passageway is blocked to get there. So that was a big one. The second big thing was the aerial combat, and if you ever want to chime in to at any point, you can do whatever you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking. Okay. Was that a wave to chime in or just wave to wave?
Yeah, I just so we sit right next to each other, so I try to be careful about overlapping with our push to talk. So I was just waiting for your push to talk to end.
It never ends.
No, it does not. But you know what? You have a lot of information to share, and so yeah, I have little quips, and that's really it. So, do you foresee any, I guess, tediousness with having to manage ships?
I mean, inevitably in these kinds of games, there's lots of like select a unit, move a unit, select a unit, move a unit, right? In a way, though, I kind of think it helps simplify some stuff, right? Because especially you're going to be able to move a lot of units all at once, right? So to some extent, yeah, there's a little bit of a tedium of like attacking with a ship because you have to click on it, you attack someone, but it's pretty fast. Like just from my own personal testing, right? It's not too bad, especially because once you've moved your ship, there's not a whole lot of options, right? You kind of have to plan out where you move that ship first so that you can kind of do, the classic, like you gotta move your ship into range and then you just do a barrage. And then either that ship goes down or you go down, right? Um, and because it moves the entire crew, you don't have to, because they can hold up to like 12 units in each ship. So you can move 12 units in one turn, and that's honestly pretty efficient as far as like a Fire Emblem game goes. But the disembarking part will be might be a little more tedious, and I'm considering like maybe adding an action that you can just unload all at once and it just like spits out everyone that it can. It may not even take an action. It just like you click unload and it just whatever available spaces it unloads units onto, right? And then you can select those units and move them. So we'll see. There's going to need like fine tuning, of course, to make sure it works. But in general, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem because if anything, it's just regular unit selecting with like one extra tiny step, which is just selecting them beforehand.
What makes you most excited about this nautical update?
I think it's because especially in Fire Emblem games, water is so underutilized, right? Like it's usually just dead space in a map. It's places where only flyers can go over, or if you have like a specialized unit, it's usually an enemy that can like traverse it, like pirates and whatnot. But the pirates are literally like swimming through the ocean, which I thought was kind of goofy. That they're like sometimes dropped into the middle of the ocean and they like swim their way to the beaches. And I think that like it doesn't really reflect how important water combat and like water, just like nautical stuff was to the ye old times, right? Traversing the water was essential to moving units, to moving supplies, and it was a constant threat in every way. Like an open beach, like a harbor, right, was so contested wherever you went because that was access to travel, right? And and so that's why I think it's just going to add like all sorts of cool opportunities where people are used to seeing, the reinforcements show up on the side of a map, right? Or a couple flyers come in. But the idea of like, oh, the galleys have arrived, and 3 galleys full of units show up on the edge of the map at the ocean, and then you have like one turn before they dock and just unload a bunch of units. I think is such a like more threatening situation, right? And should really like I want players to always be wondering like, oh, there's that big open stretch of water on this side of the map. Do I have to worry about that, right? Or do I just leave it be and continue going on my objectives, right? Only for them to not take into account, and then a bunch of pirates show up, and the pirates start raiding this village area, right? So I just think it adds more opportunities for not only like difficulty spikes and like tactical opportunities, but just because like you can have different scenarios too, right? Because there is times where you just cannot assault an area on land or by air feasibly, but you can by ship, and so I just want that to be something to do. And if like players decide, hey, I want to start utilizing docks in any battle I can and have a ship, like where like sometimes there'll just be options, right? There's one dock on a map and you can load up some units and you can send in a ship with a bunch of units and flank an area or take an area that you don't have to do on foot. So just more ways to like replay a map, right? Because lots of Fire Emblem maps are kind of meant to be beaten one way. Um, and even if you do it a different way, it's usually with different units, but otherwise, like, you hit the same choke point, you complete the map the same way, right? I like the idea of every time you do a map, you think, oh, well, I can beat it this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. And it all depends on what you've specialized in as your player with your army. So those are my thoughts on nautical warfare, and it's just cool. Like, it's just cool seeing boats ride around shooting arrows all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely adds a different layer to your strategy for sure. Are there different kinds of ships?
Yeah, there will be. So right now there's just one because it's the one I've been testing, and there hasn't been any need to like add in different ones until I have the code actually worked out right. But the nice thing is I effectively worked out the code for in the game, in the code wise, it's not called like ship code, it's vessel code. So technically it will work for airships, it will work for warships, it'll work for floating castles because those exist in the game. And there's even some references to some of my favorite like world building stuff where there's floating, more or less they're like floating jars, and they can hold like 2 people, but they can float around and they just become like mobile siege locations. And so, there's going to be a variety of these vessels that people can ride around in. Um, I'm thinking like especially that the airships will be rare, right? So not very common, but again super powerful because suddenly this airship can just float in over this whole battlefield, ascend even, because now there's ascension code, so it can ascend up, and you can just have 5 people on it with a bunch of bombs, and they just rain bombs down on top of an army. Like, that's really powerful. Even in like this game, it could devastate a battlefield, right? If you just did not contest that airship and let it just fly over the top of your army, you'd either have to spread your army out to avoid getting blown up, or you would just take it on the face and get devastated by it. So, and in the same sense, like if you get your one airship in the game, which I am like going to make, like there is like one aspect of it, right, where if players are constantly abusing something in the game, that has to be checked, right? Like I don't want players to eventually find out, oh well, I just like build 3 airships and then float around my airships and destroy everybody. Because then suddenly you have people that normally couldn't ascend can now just fly around, and oh, I trained everyone up to use explosives, and now I'm just doing bombing raids on enemies. Like, I think in every situation, and like I want to also reward players who come up with a strategy, right? Where like they buy into the strategy, they equip their units, they buy all the stuff that needs to be done with it, and then they use it to win battles. Like I think that's would be satisfying to some people. I don't want to trivialize battles, right? But if someone actually invests into something and finds like this is really good, that I think that's a cool thing to have in a game, right? So we'll see. But yeah, there's going to be different kinds of ships. I even want to have like special sort of like eventually I would like to have different size ships too. So you have like just your big old honking cargo ships that can move a bunch of people, but they're kind of slow and they can't move as far. And then you have like your real fast ships that maybe hold like half the number of units, but they're much more mobile. Their defenses are way higher, so they can't just get killed really easily. So and they'll hopefully they'll actually look distinct. I'm not super great at drawing ships because holy heck, they are confusing. Like there's so many things going on in them, right? But my goal will be to actually distinguish them in some way. But that's only if like I find a need to make a bunch of different ships, because there probably will be like some side quests that like it's just a big old naval battle, right? There's islands, that's it, and you're just building up your land-based stuff, and then you sail off, and there's almost no land in between. Like that would be really fun. It's not like a main story one because I feel like most of the main story stuff is going to be all partially land-based. But yeah, that's the idea. So yeah, there will be different ships, but mostly I'm going to work on like very distinct types of ships first before I make like small variations.
Gotcha. And then what else are you working on? You mentioned birds and some major revisions.
Yeah, so we've already been talking a little bit about it, but the aerial stuff really needed some attention, and thankfully it wasn't like a complete like huge time sink. It's just that I was kind of dreading it because I wasn't sure how hard it would be. But mostly it came down to the player could mostly access the aerial stuff, the second map, but there wasn't a whole lot to do there because for one, enemies couldn't access it unless I put them up there originally, and they didn't know what to do while they were up there. So it was just a matter of like tweaking some code, making sure they could recognize if a unit is below or above, and then moving properly to fight in that way. So now you have a proper aerial combat system where the enemies will, so if they don't have anyone to fight that's on the ground, they will just go up and ascend to avoid being attacked until they either find an enemy below to go attack again, or they hit their objective, so like to capture a place or something, then they'll descend back down and do whatever they're doing down there. And they will specifically target other aerial units. So if they're on the ground, even if they got a sweet target below, like on the ground to attack, um, there's a heavy prioritization for them to attack anything in the air because that's like that can seriously screw up their, like if you think about it, right? If you have a fighter jet fighting above you, do I shoot people on the ground or do I take out that fighter jet that can do just as much damage to me, right? Like you would go after them. Anyways, so they know what to do for the most part now. And there's going to be a few little bugs here and there with like their decision making, but they'll do that, and they can use abilities now up in the air. So for the most part, all the abilities until now had been, and by abilities I mean like spells and effects from like items like bombs and whatnot. All the abilities had been almost entirely code-wise been grounded. So their effects only affected things on the ground, or if they were up in the air, whatever was up in the air with them. It couldn't distinguish between the two, and it couldn't force it to interact on either one. So if you, for example, use a fireball up in the air, it will still affect things in the air because it's like you're throwing a fireball that's going to explode in the air, right? It doesn't really have weight to it necessarily. But bombs don't work that way. If you throw a bomb, it just flies to the ground and explodes down there. You can't really like cook a bomb to time it in the air, for example, right? So I wanted to make it. I wanted to make distinctions code-wise so that some things will never work in the air and some things will only work in the air. So there's spells that they just fly up and hit what's up in the air. So you can have grounded units that launch cool aerial spells to take out aerial units. So I made that really nice distinction. It works both ways. I've tested it out, and for the most part, it works fine. But the next step of that, right, was making it so that NPCs know the difference, so that they don't just like think, oh, well, this thing can hit everything, right? And they throw a fireball, but they throw it up in the air and there's nobody up there because they think they're hitting something on the ground, right? So they actually can distinguish between those things now. And to test that out, I added in this new item, Rook Darts. So if you guys have seen some of the Giphies, either on like the latest Kickstarter update or on the Discord, you've seen that little thing where flyer goes by and it drops all these arrow-looking things. So that was like a really fun test because I'd been meaning to add some kind of aerial weapon like that, but just haven't gotten around to it. Because another complaint that we've heard is that people are a little unsure like what benefit flyers have because they seem a little weak in combat, right? And this is where their strength is supposed to lie, right? They can fly up, avoid combat, and still hit things. So they don't have to engage in direct combat unless it's another flyer, typically. That's the goal, at least. And so items like this will be plentiful for flyers to utilize, and that's what their use is going to be. So I'm going to also add this item in for something that Rianne has in Chapter 1, so that players can utilize some Rook Darts, and when she comes in, she can just drop a line of these darts onto some enemies, and they can't do squat about it. There's no flyers that can contest her in that way, and so I want to express that like tactical advantage right away that flyers have, right? Other than being able to fly over stuff, like immediately you know, oh, I can do this. This is cool. I can just like hit all these enemies, and it's not, you know, it's not going to be a gigantic firestorm like a spellcaster could use that just devastates an entire army. But you'll be able to see how it would function in the world, right? That these people are smart. They know that if they have this advantage, they're going to take advantage of it, and you get to be part of that. So you get to use what they would use and employ it in battle. So that was a really fun thing to add, and especially with like how nice it looked. I was a little unsure that it would just like look goofy or janky, but the effect of like when they fly and it drops them and it changes to the lower level and you get to see it like hit the units and whatnot was really satisfying to be like, oh yes, that looks pretty good actually, like actually pulling it off. Because again, we don't have like a visual reference for how this would look because there's no other games that have really done this, right? So I have to kind of just invent like visually, like what's this gonna look like? Is it gonna look stupid or not? And thankfully it didn't. So I'm hoping people are really thrilled to give it a try. And I've tested it out with other items too. So you can throw bombs and whatnot, and it's just fun watching it just explode and everything, leave a crater. It's great. So, and that's just again like I guess I already explained like what that adds to the game, right? Because that's always the big question. What does this add to the game? Is it just a fun thing? Is it an Easter egg? No, this is going to be a game-changing feature that players always have to account for. Because if you were in that world, you would always be looking up in the sky for Rook flyers. Because if you see a bunch of them coming towards you, you're going to be guessing like 95% chance they're dropping a whole bunch of Rook darts on you, or worse, bombs. So you better be sending your own flyers to intercept them. So that's the goal, is to make people feel like you are fighting in a world that understands its own world.
Gotcha. And then how about morale? That's something you've worked on too.
Yeah, so I had that only like in a concept phase for a while. I had the values like in the code. You know, units have a morale value. It saves your morale value, but it didn't do anything. It couldn't, like, I had code that could change it sort of, but even that was a little incomplete. And so I really started to hash out this week especially, how does it work? What does it do? And what does it add to the game?
And real quick, why'd you add it?
So why I added it is because I made a list a long time ago that was all about military force multipliers. So for those who don't know, a force multiplier is a term in military combat in that it literally multiplies the force you can apply to a combat scenario. So it can be anything from better weapons to having a having a high ground to any number of things, right? And there was this nice big Wikipedia list of all the known force multipliers in military scenarios that have been recorded and utilized. And one of them is morale. It's literally how pumped up are your units to go die, like to literally be willing to die. And if they're not willing to die, then they ain't going to fight very well because they might just run or they might not follow orders, any number of things, right?
This is very philosophical because willing to die seems like a fatalistic view on war itself.
But like it's what are you willing to die for, right? Like, cause that's what war's about. War's about like taking your big stick and killing the other guy with your stick, or subduing them into not wanting to fight, right? It's like, and that's kind of a very basic view of it. But in the end, you have to ask like yourself: are my troops willing to go to their deaths potentially for a cause? For me,
because I would
right?
assume that it's actually the other way around. It's how. When morale is high, right?
Do they think they're not gonna die?
I don't think humans do very well with death in your mind. Like when morale is high, it's not that you're more willing to die because that's not omnipresent when your morale is high. Like, think of, like,
right.
anything, because morale can apply to other things, right, in general. So if you have high morale at work, I don't think people often, my whole point is, I don't think people often think in negatives.
How willing are you to die to finish this report? Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Exactly, yeah. I would assume morale would be that you're going to have a good time. You're going to accomplish something that it maybe is meaningful. And yeah, you may or may not die, but I don't think the focus with morale is focused on willingness to die.
Yeah, so I actually wrote a note while I was writing out like the benefits of high morale, right? That really morale should be a measure of how confident that unit is at that moment.
I would correlate it with confidence.
And that confidence, so baseline level, that confidence would mean that they think that their next attack is going to do better, it's going to do more damage, and that it might just outright like defeat that opponent, right? It's a literal like, I'm going to do better just because they feel better, right?
Exactly.
And so that's how I like started to shape the benefits of it, right? And on a baseline level, that's what it does. So the way it works in like for now, like this is very much the initial conception of the idea, because I've seen morale done in some games and I kind of don't like it, kind of do like it in some ways. A very popular analog for morale in these types of games is Heroes of Might and Magic, in that when you have high morale for amongst your units, there's a likelihood they get to act again. So they do their attack and then bing, a little light pops up and they get to go again, and I get to make another attack, right? Which I think is a cool way to do it, but it doesn't really reflect like how they feel, how they're jacked up and ready to move forward, right? It's sort of, and it also feels a little too random to me. So there's a bar now in the game, and it shows when you mouse over a unit, it will show you what their morale currently is as an army. I'm going to also add in a bar that shows their individual morale. Sorry, what?
Can you actually show us?
In game?
Maybe not in game. Well, I mean, like in game would be cool too, but just like what the bar looks like. I think it's on the thumbnail, but
it is.
Yeah.
But I can just do it in the debug menu.
Yeah. Go ahead and share your screen when you can. And hope everybody is having a great Sunday, or Monday. We've got some folks across the world too. We're kind of starting the new month of March. And I think so we're starting chapter 5 soon. Is that correct? Or are we finishing up chapter 4?
I'm going to be testing out chapter 4 because now I've got all these cool features done, right?
Yeah.
And part of So when I was writing out the objectives for chapter 4, for Sholei's alternative objective, because like there's Perrine's objectives and Sholei's objectives. Okay.
I'm making you do two things at once, but yeah, essentially there's going to be a point, you guys, where we get to ticking all the boxes as far as all of the features that the player can use. So vehicle or vessels, like the Lazy Warlock was talking about, being one of them. Aerial combat, and once these features are solidly in the game and have been tested, the next chapters are pretty much making sure that the map is in place, the units are in place, maybe adding, definitely adding new characters such as backer characters, which the Lazy Warlock has been working on pretty much every sprint. So once we get the list of features, everything else is going to be more focused on just getting the chapters out as far as like the scenes and things like that. A lot of work is being put towards features, making them solid.
And thankfully, like the number of essential features, right, is like that we need to do is dwindling. And so
exactly. Yeah.
These like so lately, like I've been able to get more or less the map itself ready really fast. I get the map ready, but then I get blocked on, okay, well, I need to have a way for them to move the ships around and like unload units. So I stop working on the map and then I do that. And then once that's done, I test it out and I'm like, okay, and now there's a bunch of flyers and they can't do anything. So I gotta add that code in.
Right.
And so on and so forth. So gradually all these things eventually like become easier and easier and easier and easier. Right?
Yeah, and we made the roadmap to be linear, and that's not actually the truth of how the workflow goes with developing a game. I believe how it actually goes is there's a lot of features in the beginning that the game will rely on every chapter afterwards, and so once those are set, then you can add as much story beats as you want afterwards. So I think if we were to redo the roadmap to more accurately reflect what actually happens, because like linear, it's simple, it's nice, you know, it's easier to look at, right? But the actual workflow goes, there's a lot of effort put in the beginning as we nail down these features. And actually, you know what a good roadmap post would be is to just show all the features and like where we're at, like 30 features, we're 19 out of 30 right now, and that kind of gives us an idea of just
like key features of the game.
Yeah, because like what you were saying about the multiplier for morale being a booster, I think as we complete that list of features, it's a booster for getting the chapters out faster because they're already set. So I think it would be good to like also refer to all the features that you have in mind, like the full list, right? And how many you've already gone through. Or even just like a 3-star rating where it's like 1 is like you got the skeleton, 2 is it's been tested, 3 is it's been polished, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and then that would give you give people who are following the development of the game a good idea of what because the more features we have to work on, the slower the chapter will be, right? And then the less features we have to work on, the faster the chapter will be. So they can kind of have like both things. You've got like the chapter roadmap, right? How many chapters we got done. And we got the features roadmap, which is like actually the grindiness of game development right there.
Right. And like to give it a good example of like how far we've come along, right, with these features. Chapter 5, which I have planned out, all the features are done for that one. So there will in a way be like nothing new other than units. So the newness will be like it's a competition actually. You're facing another ally who's like you both are trying to capture this keep. And whoever captures it gets the renown of like you defeated the Sartians sort of thing, right? And so you don't lose if they capture it, but you lose if they capture it, right? Like you lose politically. and your standing amongst the other lords drops. So, but all of that is like all of that feature-based stuff done. So it's literally just make the map, throw the units in, make the objectives, and it's like good to go. Maybe a few like abilities and stuff here and there need to be added for like new spells in case there's new spells. But for the most part, and maybe like new units, I'm not sure. But for the most part, like all the big stuff like this, it's done. Chapter 6, which is again like facing off against the Arceans, all this stuff is done. Like again, maybe new spells, but there's no huge features that need to be added after kind of this chapter that are just like gonna take a huge amount of time. The only thing that will like only big features, but they're just going to be like the polish phase, right? Like Lilette said, there's the development, the testing, and then the polish, right? Everything's in the testing phase right now. The polish is like, okay, we have all the things. Now we have to like add in menus for like to access them in some ways, right? So like there's ships, but how do you manage your ships outside of battle? Oh, well, we need to have like some tab in the unit menu that lets you sell or buy ships, sort of thing. So it's real cool how far it's come, especially knowing that like it's just gonna keep being a more of a downhill battle to do these things. And like really, because like the fun part for me developing, right, is adding new tiles into the game, new scenery, right? I love adding castles to the game. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I'll be able to add like that will be the focus, right? Is adding castles and new tiles to interact with, new spells, new items, all the real guts of the game, right? The stuff that makes it fun to like gather cool items, gather new units, manage your stuff. All that is really the core of the game that I want to like just jump right into. But it keeps having to take a back seat to make sure we have these big tier items that are in the game.
Gotcha. And we are 40 minutes in. So
good. We're talking a lot.
So okay, we talked about birds, we talked about boats, and we talked about morale. But you still haven't shown us what the morale looks like.
Yeah.
Cool.
So right now, again, most of it's in code, so you can't see a whole lot. But I'll just show you kind of what the initial phase of it looks like.
Before you do that, let me switch on over so our YouTube listeners can see. Also.
Yep.
Okay, let me figure that real quick.
Hopefully it doesn't crash for some dumb reason too, but we'll see.
Nah. It's usually just me clicking the wrong button. While I'm figuring this out, can you tell us about what you're going to be working on next sprint and kind of what your goals are for March?
Yeah, so next sprint is all about if the morale system is done, like it's pretty much going to be implementing the rest of the morale system. So all the code I've effectively done, like the preliminary code. So the benefits that applies for the most part. There's one part that I haven't done yet. But it's really easy to like add the code in, like the baseline code, like what modifiers it changes, what it affects, right? But then the next step is interactability. So letting people see that the morale has changed, letting people know what those benefits are. That's like another layer of every feature, right? Because if under the hood everything's working, but nobody can see how it's working, then it just makes it confusing. So that next step is, okay, making it accessible to players. So they can see the bar, like when their morale increases, it shows the bar go boop and go up. And if there's a new benefit from that like morale, then it shows it, right? That's what all next week is going to be. If that works, fine. So if it takes about a week, which is kind of what my guess is going to be, to add in the menus, the tooltips, and whatnot, it'll probably be about a week's worth of time, especially with testing, because I'm going to be testing it in the new chapter. Then hopefully that will be next week, is just ironing out any problems, making sure people can see the benefits, testing the benefits, like especially when we all get to like exactly what those are in a moment. And then the following week will be running through chapter 4, making sure everything works. I've learned myself that I can't just like over test every map. I need to just make sure all the features, objectives, events, and scenes work, and then move to the next one, because really it's going to come down to play testing that's going to be able to really elucidate all the problems that a map has, because I just can't. I'm very quickly learning I can't find all the problems, and it comes down to players not understanding things or being confused or frustrated with it to really tell me what I need to fix. I can't always tell myself what to fix. So I'm leaving that up to play testers to actually play test, and then me to do those changes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And we're all switched over, so we can see your screen now.
Cool. Okay, so if I mouse over one of these guys, then you see there's a new bar that just popped up down there, and I can add morale. I have little like input buttons to just change the morale. So boop, 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 boop. You can see that little bar goes up, or boop, 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 boop. It goes down. So the way morale works is that there are essentially two factors in it. There is your army morale, so that's the general sense of how the battle is going for your army. How many objectives you've completed, if you've captured locations, if you've lost units, or if you've defeated enemy units, so on and so forth. There's a bunch of factors that pretty much come down to like how successful is this battle going, right? And that's what code-wise is called the base morale. Then there's individual morale. So every one of these units also has their own individualized morale, which isn't shown very well just yet. It is in the code, but if I say increase Choles here, you can see the morale is going back up for him, for like the army. That's because individual morale also factors into total morale. So you can't actually just max out your total morale with objectives and whatnot. You have to have peppy units, more or less. And when you do that, so individually, they aren't affected too much by the morale. It's the total morale, this bar here, that causes the effects. So, and I can like play around for this for a while, but it's not too important. More or less that you have to have in order to really max out your morale, you would have to have everyone's morale maxed out, which is actually kind of unreasonable. And that's why you can see this kind of final little bar. I tried to point to my screen like people could see it. But this like all the way to the right, you can see there's this fancy looking bar or like marker. It's not at the maximum value because I'm not going to expect units to reach that point. So what are these little guys, right? These little markers. So when you increase your morale, there is a bonus you get to your hit rate. Is just the basic thing that you get. Your hit rate for all your units goes up slightly. Especially early on, it'll be important because you can get a significant increase to your hit rate, like percentage-wise at least, right? Later on, it will require other upgrades and whatnot to make it more beneficial. But once you reach one of these bars, the first one on the right, for example, it unlocks another addition. You start doing more damage as well. So not only are you hitting more often, you're hitting harder when your enemies hit. So it's a measure of confidence, right? Like as your army is getting more confident in how the battle's going, they're more willing to strike, and they're striking with confidence, and so they're not only like swinging harder because they're more eager, but they're actually not worried about whether or not their hits will hit. And so again, it's like a mental boost, right, in a way. That final one, not only does it give you a bonus to crit rate, so you're like criticaling even more often, but it causes a special effect, which is for now is called a morale surge. So that little guy, that gem will pretty much light up and then go out. And during a morale surge, it pretty much applies a bunch of random buffs, and like they're random, like chosen between a few types of conditions. But your army more or less gets a temporary boost, like one-time boost for the battle. So they'll all get all these different boosts, and usually it comes down to kind of like Heroes of Might and Magic. They can get this what's called invigorated is the condition, and they effectively get another action for that turn. So you pretty much get like a huge boost in what you can accomplish in a single turn phase. And it's pretty much meant to represent like you're just like kicking ass at this point, right? And your army is so ready, that you're on the winning end already, and you're just mopping the floor with them. So if you hit that point, you're doing great already, most likely. On the opposite end, you can see there's these red guys, and the one on the left, they do pretty much the opposite. The baseline is they do the opposite of what the positives are. You start hitting less, and then when you hit that small red diamond, you start doing less damage. So minus power, minus hit rate, and then when you hit that broken gem, you get a morale break. And a morale break works essentially the opposite to what a morale surge is. That little guy shatters. It can only happen once per battle, per like enemy like phase. So like if there's one group of enemies, they can get morale broken once. Your team can only get morale broken once. But a morale break is really bad. So just like how you can get invigorated with the morale surge, you can pretty much, in a morale break, enemies lose actions. So they can lose actions, or they get a bunch of really bad conditions. So they can be terrorized and they start to flee. They can be just stunned. They don't know what to do. They might actually just give up and surrender. So some of them will literally like, bing, they'll say surrendered. And they'll go neutral. They won't fight you, and you can't kill them. So they just give up more or less. And you can capture them as they are, and they become prisoners. Or in some cases, they just decide to turn tail and run. Like they just break formation, and they just start fleeing to whatever like side of the map is closest and get out of there. And all of those like bad effects are dependent on that individual unit's morale. So units that have really high morale, even though their army morale might be low, they're unaffected, or they have a really low chance. But anyone that's got really like bottomed out morale will just like crumple more or less. And of course, this can happen to your army. Your leaders, your like officers, the unique units, they will never give up and surrender and whatnot. So that it's not like you don't have to worry about, Artemir or Ania or any of these guys just being like, sorry guys, I give up. I'm not part of your team anymore. That won't ever happen. But your generics might, because generics can be replaced and removed and whatnot. So if you're not careful, you can actually lose quite a few units who might just give up on you if you're not keeping their morale up. So there are lots of ways to affect morale. There's spells, of course, which are the most common. Order spells are probably the best way to increase your morale, and it's probably a good idea to just start off a battle in some cases by just casting a few of these spells, getting your people really ready, because there will be battles where you start with low morale, actually, where the situation is dire. And this is a big reason I really like this feature, because you can use it to reflect the direness of a scenario, right? If, for example, people have played Chapter 1 already, right? Those who have, at least. You know that, like, the Onostrani, who Perina is leading, their morale is probably a little low right now, actually. They've been fighting really hard, but they're about to be surrounded and probably lose. So they actually, their army, not your army, but their army starts with low morale. And if you just let them keep getting wailed on by the Sartians, their morale will break, actually. And they might give up. So you don't want that to happen. You want to get in there and stop this like siege before it gets really bad. Meanwhile, there might be battles where the Sartians have low morale, and the goal, and this is really like the crux of where I decided to start working on this, was in the latest chapter, Sholate, that's his primary objective, actually, is not to rout the enemy, but actually just break their morale. To break their morale and make them give up. Because he's not a pacifist, but he doesn't like killing people, and his tactics more or less work on the level of, I want to win the war by causing as little bloodshed as possible. So your goal is to just break their morale, and once they're broken, most of them will surrender at that point. And so his goal is like break their morale, limit the number of your casualties taking the beach, and then capture the location, of course. So that's why I started doing this. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity. It's going to be a part of the game. It's going to be an important part of the game. I should just get it done now. So I just got to work. And so far, I think the bar, like this kind of morale bar, looks okay for now. It needs to be spiffied up. It needs to be able to show like individual morale. And then I need to do the morale surge and break code. So I know pretty much what conditions I want to add when it happens, but I just haven't had like a script that says cause morale break, and it does it. And then I have to add visuals. So I want there to be something where when it hits one of those like final bars, it like if it's a morale break, it shatters, right? It morale break, and then like it shows everyone getting all depressed and sad and whatnot. If it's a morale surge, then there's beaming lights and everyone, I even have considered like for that turn maybe, right? It plays different music, so it'll actually play some cool triumphant music when you get a surge, or it plays some real depressing music when you get broken, and same for the enemies. So we'll see.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious. So, go ahead and continue sharing. But I know that you were playing a game or something the last time I looked over. Was wondering if you could share that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll share that then.
I'm pretty sure it was Fire Emblem.
It is Fire Emblem, but it's not Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem. I'm playing a ROM hack actually. So
Oh,
I
nice.
was kind of like, so I try to take breaks, right? Like I'm supposed to take breaks, not work all the time. And I've played a lot of like games in my backlog recently, and have had fun with those. But I have not played a like Fire Emblem tactical game in a long time, and I think it's because I just play my game so much through testing, and I'm always just wrapped up in it that I just haven't really delved into many Fire Emblem games, especially the new ones. Like I don't have a whole lot of interest in the new ones, but I have not tried out any ROM hacks, and mostly because the ones I saw a long time ago were kind of crappy. Like they weren't that good. They were mostly just fan projects, and they were neat, right? And some of them like were one or two chapters that were kind of fun, but I hadn't really come across one that was like well done. But it's been a long time since then, and I decided I'm gonna look up like what kind of ROM hacks are out there. Are there any like complete ones? And sure enough, there's some like full on games that have been made, and they all have like their own music. All of them have like this one specifically has all custom sprites. I've been really impressed by the portraits. Some of them are like okay, but most of them are all custom. Whereas I'm kind of used to people like splicing portraits in, and this one has all hand drawn, unique ones. Really, really cool, actually. And the story is very different than a regular Fire Emblem game, which I think is very fun. It's more like Thracia 776 for those who know that game, and that you are really just like a scrappy group of like bandits, actually. The way you start out, and I love that start of just like, oh, I'm not some fancy lord that is going out to protect their their people. I'm just a dude and his friends who are getting oppressed and becoming like Robin Hood types. I really like it so far. And I'm already a couple chapters into it, and there's custom animations, there's custom sprite work that's really, really well done. So this is called Vision Quest for anyone who doesn't know. And I don't know where the name comes from, it doesn't really make sense to me, but it's called Fire Emblem Vision Quest. It's a ROM hack of Fire Emblem 8. And for those who are wondering, I do have copies of all the games, and so I am allowed to make like the ROM hack these. So legally it is okay. As long as you own the game, you're okay, you can do that. Just can't distribute it. So that's why we are showing this right now. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun, so I'm probably gonna play it for like a couple minutes afterwards, just to like talk about it and talk about how it's been like influencing my thoughts. Because while playing this, I was reminded of like how small so many Fire Emblem maps are. And
Let's
I
see
might
it
have mentioned
then.
this already, huh?
Let's see
see
it
it.
then. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Yeah, you could just like voice out your thoughts while you play it. We've got 4 minutes left, so we'll just do a little 4 minute like play session. Storch, is that his name?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, so the names are a little funny sometimes, but I do like that they try to come up with some interesting names. A real problem that Fire Emblem has, and especially just like I don't know if it's necessarily just Japanese RPGs, but at least it's always the translated versions of them, is they always use like historical names for people or for like for characters, people, and items, right? So it's like, I have Gungnir, the spear. Oh, you've got the spear of you've got the Norse spear of, what is it? Not Loki, of Odin. It's like, no, it's not the spear of Odin. Well, why is it called Gungnir then? Because that's his spear. I don't like it when they just use direct historical references, and this doesn't. And sometimes it's like you get a weird name thing. So I'm on push to talk, so it's harder for me to play the game at the same time. But let me close my game too.
You know what? I'm actually I won't talk during this session, maybe. So you can just switch from push to talk to
No, don't worry about
voice.
it, because I'm just gonna be like, it's pretty easy to control the game with one hand actually. But yeah, so the game does add fantasy names into it, right? And I am absolutely 100% sure that people are going to read some of this like character names and be like, that name sounds so dumb.
Oh my god, they're brothers.
Yeah, so I mean, he's dead, like the guy on the left. So spoilers. Anyone who's watching this, like, it's not much of a spoiler. It's like the
That's why
beginning of
he's
the game.
blue.
Yeah, he's a ghost.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think they could do like transparency in some cases. So, yeah, so he was having like a paralysis dream about his his dead brother, but like it is like in some of the, again, like some of the portraits are perfect, but I like that they're all unique. Because I've just been so used to these hashed together portraits that just don't look very good, and lots of the characters are fun. They have interesting personalities. Most of them are very good actually. Like I haven't come across a unit that's like sucks. Um, so
His design's cool.
yeah, like every design is really impressive, honestly, and I'm just liking it. I actually did this side chapter here, so um,
And then you said you were learning some stuff.
yeah. So I just was reminded how small so many maps are in Fire Emblem.
They're satisfying though.
They are. Like in just a couple hours, I was able to blaze through like 8 chapters of this game, right? Whereas in Lords of Nysera, it might take a couple hours to beat a single battle sometimes if you like want to do everything and find all the secrets and yada yada yada, right? Because they're just bigger maps. But I think it will be good to break up these big battles that I have in the game with smaller maps, and that's partly why like Chapter 4 is smaller. Like by comparison, it's the smallest map so far of the mainline quests. Because they are satisfying. Like it is satisfying sometimes to just do like a smaller map that is a little more condensed. All the action is just right up in your face, and there's less time wasted just moving between spaces, right? What's really cool about this game specifically too is that they kind of take care of the lacking aspects of some of the other classes. Usually, like for example, like armored units, the big heavy armored units, they're fun, but they're not very good. But the first armor unit you get in this one is like, she's so cool. She's just like this spunky, like she sounds like a character straight out of Nysera, and so I'm like, yeah, she's awesome, because she's this daughter of a blacksmith who puts on her armor and just goes out and starts kicking ass, and she's got great stats. She has a special spear that she gets, all these cool things, you know. I love that there's all these different cultural groups too in this game specifically, and whereas in lots of games in Fire Emblem, they're kind of all samey looking, and nobody really talks about where they come from necessarily. Fire Emblem 7 did an okay thing because like there's a few distinct places like Sakai and whatnot, but they really lean into it in this one, that there's like culturally distinct groups that sort of band together, and you can notice like that they are from that region. And I just think that's cool. So, but yeah, I think just based off of this, I'm probably going to, any side chapters, I'm definitely going to focus on making them small, to make them small, satisfying, and just like fun to do, so they don't completely distract from the game. And one thing I'm noticing too is that I have this. This is a problem I have, and it's part of like my genealogy brained map making. Is you start on one like corner or side of the map and work your way to the other. Whereas I do like maps that you sometimes are in like the middle, right? And there's enemies coming from all sides that you have to take into account. Um, and that just you just see that a lot more in these GBA type games because the maps are small. They can get away with having units just kind of pop out of everywhere. And I don't have the music playing though because there is music from like all over the place. So, like in one of the maps, there was just straight up like Chrono Trigger music playing. So, um, that's the only thing I would say is probably the worst part of the game. It's not that like Chrono Trigger music is bad, but some of the music is just not good. Um, it just like sounds real janky, and I could tell that it's just like whoever they could get to do it more or less made music for the game. But sometimes it's just a little oof, especially when it's supposed to be um, a very like tense moment, and then the music plays like it's like, wait, isn't this some scary dream you're having? And it's playing like not even creepy carousel music, just like a carnival music that's supposed to sound fun. Um, One thing I do like about this game, I mentioned it's very like Thrashia esque, is there's all the different class distinctions. So rather than just cavaliers, there's sword cavaliers, there's lance cavaliers, there's even like sword Pegasus knights and whatnot, and lance Pegasus knights and so on. So let's actually look at one like just to show people what I mean by small maps, right? So like this map is literally only a few squares outside the window. Um, I don't think like this map could fit inside. Like you could fit two of these maps inside the maps in Nysera right now. Like this just goes to show how small they were. And again, this is like a ROM hack, so not exactly a perfect analog, but this is like what I'm used to or at least what I was introduced to with Fire Emblem is just these tiny little maps. Um, but this specific ROM hack has some really cool added things. You can see that like it shows the items that they have in their equipment. I think that's pretty neat. The old games didn't really have that, but they have these indicators too on the map for enemies that have either a weapon that's effective against you, or if they have a killer weapon. All these different like indicators, which I very much am inspired to add into Nysera, and I think will help smooth out a lot of the sort of obtuse nature of weapons in the game because Fire Emblem has the triangle, like the weapon triangle thing, right? And Lords of Nysera doesn't. I've definitely discarded the weapon triangle, mostly because I just don't like it. I don't like that it limits everything for one to like spears, swords, and axes. But it just doesn't actually make sense in a lot of cases because it's more like, well, if a weapon's longer than your weapon, it's usually better than your weapon. Like a long stabby stick is going to typically just be better than any short weapon. So that's kind of how I've turned it into the trait system in Lords of Nysera. But that ease of access is what makes these games fun, especially for like when you're a kid like me, 10, 15, almost 20 years ago now, playing these games. It's real easy to just jump into it and be like, oh, sword good against axe. I like that. But at that time, it didn't need indicators, right? But adding indicators like this ROM hack has just makes it even more accessible to be like, oh, there's an enemy that's going to possibly kill my guy in one hit. I'll make sure to do something about that. So I've taken that to heart, and I think I'm going to draw up some icons later, either this week or maybe next week, depending on if I have time, and add them in. So when you select your unit and there's a guy nearby that has advantage against you, it'll show the little green arrow popping up, disadvantage, showing down, and so forth. And then especially like effectiveness, because there's a lot of abilities and weapons that are effective in the game. So showing that effectiveness, I think, will be very important as well. But let's just like play this for a little bit. I think we're already over time, but I wanted to just like kind of show off just how cool this ROM hack is too. So let's do that. I also got this Wyvern Knight now, so that's neat. And yeah, just like,
that scar is so well done.
yeah, isn't it? He's a very interesting dude. Like he's just a mercenary, but he's got this like really interesting backstory in the way he like interacts with people. He just looks like a thug initially, but he actually has this really interesting backstory that you wouldn't expect out of him. And I love that kind of stuff where it's like, on the surface he's just this rugged looking like hobo with a sword, but he's talking about things that you wouldn't think he should know, and I just think that's neat. So let's just go through some of the characters. I just got these two here. Bosco is actually like the best spear fighter I've ever used in a Fire Emblem game. I'm still not sure what some of the like added classes do. Like this is a staff mage, and they have uniques like all these unique sprites and whatnot, and I don't know what she does. So it even shows their. See, I didn't even know it shows their growths. That's neat. I should probably do that too. Just make it so that people can see the growths all the time. How do I just see their stats though? I wonder if I have to switch something. Anyways, it's cool. Like the classic trope of the Jagan, which is like you get the paladin that's already upgraded and he's just a experienced sync. They do kind of a soothe Jagan with this one with Esphere, who she's kind of the like the mother of this whole family actually, and she's this super experienced thief actually. So early on, she's your best unit, but she's also level 9 and everyone else is level 1. So super useful, but you don't have to use her but like if you use her though, right, you're still using someone that you want to eventually upgrade. So I very much prefer this kind of Jagan where they're just going to be a game long unit that you probably use, and because they're a thief, you get to use them early on instead of getting like a thief who's just a weak ass loser later on. She's actually very useful. She has cool equipment, etc., etc. This dude, bow fighter, which like that's an old callback to some old Fire Emblem stuff with like beefy bow fighters and whatnot, is great. Arcady didn't like him at first, but later he's just becoming like an absolute monster. Super fast, pretty powerful. Your classic little girl mage. I love the more or less there's like the Japan of this world. Is just these cool people who just straight up are like a Japan reference. She's been a great flyer so far, but still kind of has the flyer problems of being a little weak. Marlin, who if there's one thing I would change about it, just move that other eyeball up like 1 pixel, my guys. Because from this angle it looks okay, the other angle does not. But freaking beast, like he has just got non-stop strength, speed, and skill. So he's got great stats right now. This is the knight that I was just like crowing about because she just tanks everything and just kicks ass. And her personality again is like straight out of Nysera. And then Storch, good old Storch, who is probably he's been kind of hard for me to really appreciate because he's sort of just a mercenary, like at least stat wise and whatnot, which I don't really care for too much, but I'm sure there's going to be some aspect of him that becomes important. And I just realized there's leadership. I didn't know that leadership was in the game. Again, like this is a ROM hack, and so many of these features were just not in even Fire Emblem 8. So there's all these talking things too. This is something I do in my game as well. Units can talk to other units. So Lejos, I don't know who Lejos is, so let's go find out where Lejos is in the enemy battle. Unless Lejos is not out there. Should also be looking at all their stuff because, oh yeah, I'm going to definitely steal Croller's red gem. You look like a crawler. Alright, so I'm guessing Leisure pops up. There's a secret book too, stat upgrade item. Definitely stealing that too. Yeah, I don't see a Leisure. He's probably going to pop up in a little bit. Put another red gem. Yeah, this specific ROM hack too just loves to throw in stuff to steal, which is, again, you have your thief early on, so there's just, you get opportunities to steal stuff all the time. It's great. There's Lejos. He's a sniper. Neat. All right, so I'm just gonna play this for a little bit, unless we want to wrap it up. What do you think, Millette?
I think this has been great. Thanks so much for sharing with us. And for
Yeah.
those who are watching, thank you so much for joining us for the Sunday's Speaker Sunday. And when is the next time we'll see them, Tony?
So we won't be doing Wreck-It Wednesday this week because we're like on a 1 week basis for streams. But next week, so again, not the upcoming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, we will be doing Wreck-It Wednesday. So.
Awesome.
And we're going to be going over all the new stuff that I added in. Probably actually just testing out Chapter 4. Just like running a big old play test of it, seeing if everything works out, seeing how all these new features actually interact.
Ooh, I think that would be a fantastic Wreck-It Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the goal. The goal is going to be Wreck-It Wednesday. We do a full playthrough of Chapter 4, and people get to see the boats, the aerial combat, the morale system, all working in tandem.
That's awesome. Yeah. Perfect. Well, we'll see you guys next stream, which is going to be a Wreck-It Wednesday stream. And like always, the demo is out, so definitely check that out. If you haven't joined our Discord just yet, go ahead and find that in the YouTube description. And of course, press that like button for us. It definitely helps people find Lords of Nysera. And if you think that you enjoy Lords of Nysera and you think other people would enjoy it too, go ahead and hit that like button.
Share with your friends. Give them links. Tell them to join the Discord. All that jazz.
Thanks.
Another little thing to look forward to is I'm working on 2 of the other backer characters. I've got one of the designs hashed out, and so I'm starting the pixel art on that one. And I've got another one that I've got the color scheme done, more or less. I just need to do the different variations and see if they like it. So we have a few more backer characters that are going to be shown off pretty soon as well.
With that, have a good Sunday.
Peace!
Bye, guys.